Hi, this is Johannes with Glassbox, and in this video we're going to look at how to move your virtual camera with Dragonfly for Unreal Engine. This assumes that you've already installed Dragonfly with Unreal Engine and connected your companion app like this. If that's not the case, take a look at our Getting Started video, how to set up Dragonfly for Unreal Engine. Cool. The first thing we see once we have our companion app connected is, of course, that we can rotate the camera. But we want to make sure that we can also move the camera. And to do that, move your device up and down or walk forwards and backwards. You will probably not see a lot of movement if you're sitting on a desk, because by default, the camera movement is 1-to-1, meaning 1 meter in the physical world is a meter in your virtual world. Sometimes though, you may feel like you get no movement at all, however far you walk with the device. And if that's the case, let's quickly take a look at our units and see that they're set up correctly. Let's first look at our unit conversion value in the setup panel. You want this value to be set to 100 for most projects. That means that we're assuming that 1 meter is mapped to 100 Unreal units. That's how most projects are set up. So if this, for example, is set to a 1 for you, go ahead and change this to 100. And then secondly, let's take a look at our movement scaling section. This is a setting that you may change every once in a while working with Dragonfly. 1 in all of these fields means that 1 meter in the physical world is 1 meter in the virtual world. And we can change this, right? Let's say I want more movement. I can type different values into all of these fields, or I can go in and use these quick set buttons, for example, to set this to 10, meaning that 1 meter in my physical space is 10 meters in my virtual scene now. And you can see how this immediately gives me a lot more movement, and I can play around with this. I can take this to the extreme by setting it to 100, for example, and now I'm creating much larger movements. And I could use this to create a shot like this, right? So this would be more of a drone shot or a crane shot, something like that. But I can also use this to reposition myself inside the scene to get to a different position. Let's do a quick detour and also look at comfort tilt. Comfort tilt doesn't really change anything in terms of the camera's behavior. It is a convenience feature. Sometimes you may prefer not to hold your device upright, but you may want to lean it slightly. And we can accomplish this with comfort tilt. So by putting in a little bit of an angle here, minus 15 degrees usually works well for me. I can pitch down my device and still have the camera pointing forward while I can move the camera around more conveniently and more ergonomically. Another great way of moving around in your environment is by using joystick input. And joystick input can come from hardware input devices. Anything that gets recognized by Windows or the iPad will usually work. But in my case, I'll use on-screen joysticks, and that's a good way to get started for you as well. So let's take a look at how that works. On my iPad here, I'll tap the settings button in the upper left corner. I'll go to the controls tab here, and then I'll drag 3 on-screen joysticks into my viewport here. This is my personal preference. You can customize this however you want. So I'll exit the settings here. You can see that I can move these around like physical joysticks, but they don't do anything yet. So let's change that. Let's open the bindings window here and let's add 4 axis bindings. 4 because we have 3 different movement directions, and I also want to add 1 to be able to pan my camera around. And so I'll go into each one of these real quickly to set them up. The first one is already set up correctly. This is forward movement. That's perfect. Let's look at the second one. This should be left-right movement. The third should be up movement. And the fourth one, as I said, I want to use this to be able to pan my camera around. Cool. So I have these 4 settings here. You can go deeper into these settings, for example, by specifically fine-tuning the joystick sensitivity or by playing around with the space settings here. But let's start with something basic. So I have these 4 settings, and all I have to do to connect my joysticks is to go through them, click the bind button. So I'll do that for the forward movement, and I will pull my joystick that I want to use for this forward. And just like that, you can see we are connected here, and I can move my camera forward and backward with this. Let's do the same thing for left, right as well. I'll go to that binding, I'll click bind again, pull my joystick to the right, and now I have left, right, and forward and backward movement. Let's do the same thing for up as well. Click bind, pull my other joystick upwards, so I have something to move myself upwards here. And then let's also do this for my panning. Click bind, pull my joystick to pan. You can see that I accidentally bound the up-down axis to panning, right? That can happen. That's just because I accidentally pulled slightly into the wrong direction. No big deal though. I can fix this just by clicking binding again, being a bit more careful, pulling to the right, and there you go. Now I'm happy with this joystick. So at this point I can close this bindings window. All of these settings will of course persist. One thing to note is that the joystick speed changes with scaling, right? So if you change your scaling from 1 to 10, for example, not only will your movement input from the device change, but your joystick movement will also be quicker. If you prefer to change them individually, you can also do that by specifically changing this joystick speed. So let's say I'm at 1, but I want my joysticks to be slightly faster. I can do that by simply setting my joystick to something like 5. Let's look at that. Yeah, maybe I'm more happy with this movement speed, but the scale of my tracking input is unchanged. So that's joystick input. You can totally use joystick input when creating shots. For example, we can use this to do an easy push in, right? But for the most part, you'll probably use joysticks more for navigating your scene, finding new starting frames, and then doing the actual shot with the motion tracking input. But of course, it's up to you. These tools will definitely help you move around in your scene. Let's look at one final thing that will help you navigate your scene, especially when you get lost, right? Sometimes we may accidentally end up somewhere that we didn't want to go, and it's nice to have a quick way to go back to a known starting point. And that's what Dragonfly's home location is perfect for. For example, let's use this rock that's very central in this courtyard. I will click it, and then I can click the Home to Selected button. And that just means that my camera's origin is where that rock is now. So whenever I click camera to home now, my camera will teleport to the rock. You can see that we are actually inside the rock. That's because that's where the rock's origin is. But we can also then modify this slightly, for example, by pushing our Z position slightly upwards so that we will end up putting our home location slightly above the rock, right? So if we look down now, there's the rock. That's what our home position is at. And whenever I lose myself in the world, I can always go back to that home location just by clicking camera to home. And there we are, back in the center of the courtyard. And finally, when you want to position your camera for a shot, sometimes you may want to rotate your camera around. I already showed you how to bind camera pan to a joystick like this, and that's of course very useful. But I also want to point out that we have the same control in our operator main interface here. So if you are moving the camera around from this position, you can also change the viewing direction simply by dragging this interface directly from operator main. Cool. And that should help you move your camera with Dragonfly for Unreal Engine.